Da 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 da. Apparently we now have a theme song. Da 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 da. I've never heard it. Ba ba da 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 da. Hi everybody.
I guess we're starting.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Chaos Infinity Roundtable Discussion. Take 15.
Josh.
Ian.
Jeremy.
And this is.
So I guess this is my shit today. So this is going to be kind of relevant in an episode we're going to put up. Not the next one. The next one's our 10th anniversary. Or 10th show anniversary. 10th episode.
Well, this will be the 9th episode.
Yes, and the next one will be 10th.
Yes.
And then the one after that, this is going to be relevant toward.
Yeah. So it's set up.
Right, but anyway, it's still something worth talking about, and that is, when it comes to film, there are too many damn genres. This actually came from a discussion. I was talking movies with people I work with, and I had mentioned, how much of a fan of horror movies I am. And I thought, it's like, oh, what do you like? I'm like, yeah, Night of the Living Dead, Halloween, Seven. They're like, Seven's not really a horror movie. It's more of a suspense crime, dark suspense crime procedural. And I'm like, stop. If you've got to use more than 2 words to describe a genre, you're not describing a genre anymore. Now you're just describing the movie. I mean, it might as well be an IMDb synopsis at this point. So, I've decided, and I hope all you cinephiles that are watching kind of can agree with me on this one. There are 6 genres of movies that are acceptable. These are what I call engagement genres. I'll talk about the other 7 genres later. That is, you're engaged through fear, anticipation, and dread. That's horror, suspense, low-key thrillers, like Vacancy would fall under this genre. You have action. You're engaged through high adrenaline action. I think you're not supposed to use a word in the definition of the word you're using.
That's the thing about action. It doesn't have time to think. So
That's
it just
true.
uses.
It
is what it is.
That's fair. A lot of science fiction and fantasy falls into this category. The third is drama. This is where your engagement comes from watching specifically how characters interact and grow.
Various other bits of fantasy and science fiction fall into that.
Yes. The third is romance. This is where you're specifically watching 2 characters grow together. It is very fantastic.
Fantastic.
But yes, it tends to be a genre that tends to be very unrealistic because it's meant to engage you in this fantasy of a romance. Mm-hmm. Comedy? Is that the 5th?
Yes.
I think you said comedy.
Yes.
Did I say comedy?
Yes.
You haven't mentioned comedy.
Okay,
yet.
yes, comedy, which is, it engages you through just pure joy. You can even have a comedy where you don't laugh. But if you just go in and you're just smiling and it's just making you happy, it's a comedy. And the 6th is art house. This engages you through mind fuckery. If any of you have ever seen a David Lynch movie, you know what I'm talking about. Or Salvador Dali, his paintings would fall under this. Or
It's all what did I see?
the point of art house is to engage you by forcing you to think in ways you've never thought a human being could think. Because a lot of the people who make these think in ways human beings could not think. Drugs.
Yeah, drugs.
So every movie can fall into at least 1, usually 2 of these categories. Shaun of the Dead is a horror, but it is more a comedy than it is a horror movie, though it has horror elements.
Because your primary engagement is the joy rather than...
I guess comedy's got some weirdness, because there's gallows humor, which I'm a fan of. And I find joy in the farcical idea of making fun of something that would be considered too sad to laugh about, like Shaun of the Dead, watching a guy get his intestines pulled out. Is purely as a reference to Lucille Fulci movies.
It is pretty macabre, but in the same way they made it funny. So.
Yeah.
Talking about too sad to be funny. Ever hear of Irish humor?
No.
It's a specific type of comedy. It is just sad, but it's like my mother was very depressed. She filled her pockets full of rocks and walked into the ocean. It was Christmas Day. And that's the joke. And I'm like, what the hell?
Okay. So they're trying to get mileage out of the awkward laughter.
Yeah.
Because I was waiting for a punchline.
Yeah. Apparently that was the punchline.
Alright.
Huh.
Go Irish people.
Yeah, and that's like a style of comedy for them. But
So yeah, like, I guess like most superhero movies fall under action. And
it's like I never really thought about the engagement genre idea until you brought it up, but because I always fell under the old original traps of what genres are, and it's like as evidence from my D20 mug here, I'm a big fan of the fantasy aesthetic.
Well, that's the other type of genres. You have aesthetic genres. You would have fantasy, which take place in a world where our idea of realism doesn't exist.
It's usually based off of mythology and folklore, and
A lot of it is.
yeah.
You know. And then science fiction it's like fantasy, except it takes the idea of science and pushes it to its breaking point. To varying degrees. You have hard science, which would be like a Star Trek.
But fantasy usually ignores science.
Ignore science.
Science fiction embraces it and takes it a step further until...
to the point of something like Star Wars, it takes the idea of science to its breaking point.
Where basically, can't... Yeah, but...
Although I would make the argument that Star Wars is fantasy more than science fiction.
It's one of those weird hybrid
I
anyways.
see it as the opposite. I see it's more science fiction than fantasy. Mostly because the Force, which would be the fantastical part, is actually, it's right up front and center when we're watching.
But the most of the world is technology
The
based.
world itself is based off of mostly the science part.
I would argue that the science stuff in Star Wars
it also
stretch is kind of the idea of a lightsaber.
I would also, to me, I would also throw back at that the Star Trek technology, which is basically on the same level. Phasers and blasters are the same thing.
They're not a beam of light that just decides to stop after so long.
No.
And Star Trek tries to at least acknowledge scientific ideas, like they have inertial dampeners to at least acknowledge that this much distance would require some way of dealing with inertia, where Star Wars still uses the World War II aerial combat model, where you have a giant slow-moving ship and then these little ships darting around.
Yeah, Star Wars uses soft science and Star Trek uses hard science.
So
Right, I just think the fantasy elements, at least to the viewer, are much more up and center. But that is a debate to be had, because it does hold elements of both.
And really, if we get into this argument, you're falling into the trap you're trying to avoid by redefining the genre.
That is true.
yeah.
It's just...
But then, of course, other aesthetic genres include urban, which take place in packed cities. Things like Quarantine would be urban. And I'm even trying to avoid when people say urban, a lot of times they mean black culture. But
No,
I'm kind of
urban
trying to...
as in city.
City. I'm kind of trying to avoid that because...
Metropolitan.
I feel like the idea of lumping a idea into being black is kind of racist in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like, well, this is how black people act. And I'm like, isn't that kind of racist saying that this is how black people act? Well, black people are the ones saying it. I'm like, okay, it still feels kind of bigoted to me to...
You're still funneling a race of people in one category.
Even if they're the ones doing it themselves.
And you know what? You have a white person act like that, and then all of a sudden that's...
I cannot remember the name of it for the life of me. There's a Spike Lee movie where he kind of satirizes the idea of a black person creates a minstrel show in order to showcase how silly the idea of a minstrel show and a lot of like black actors and producers get on board because it's a way to make money off white people instead of accurately portraying the culture. It's actually a really interesting satire of the way black people are used in...
Do the Right Thing?
It's not Do the Right Thing.
Oh.
Do the Right Thing... this is a theme in a lot of Spike Lee movies, but this one is specifically about television producers and the way the television and movie industry has perpetuated stereotypes even among the people it is stereotyping. But anyway, that's a digression. Now, of course, there's suburban movies. Suburban horror is a very common one, I mean, Halloween, the first well-known slasher movie is suburban, because Black Christmas came first, but people don't remember Black Christmas except for the fact it had a god-awful remake. I don't know.
Anyway, we got you off track.
You did get me off track, but I feel like I've kind of made the point that we should be able to lump a genre of movie in two words: the engagement and the aesthetic form. This idea of like, well, it's not really a comedy, it's more of a farce. A farce is just a type of comedy. Just accept it. It's really prevalent on comedy and horror. It's like people are embarrassed to call their movie a horror movie or a comedy movie. And I want to change that.
The comedy one I can understand, well, not the embarrassment. I understand the comedy one because there's just so many comedies coming out.
And there are so many different comedy styles to do this. Yeah.
That is true.
There were a lot of genres of comedy.
They want to try to
parody,
differentiate
spoof,
themselves.
a parody, spoof, farce.
And
Those are all different.
And a lot of that argument can be say true of horror. There's a lot of horror, and it is different because you take a movie like the new French extreme horror movies like Inside or Martyrs, and that is a way the French version of the two, not the American remakes. I haven't seen the American remake of Inside, but Martyrs was garbage. But you take those, they are not the same beast as, let's say, a Nightmare on Elm Street or a Halloween. And speaking of, Seed of Chucky, Bride of Chucky, they're not horror movies, they're comedies. Don't put them in your horror movie collection. They're not scary. They're not trying to be scary.
No, they aren't.
I could argue they're not funny, but I think they're trying.
There is
to
a
be
reason
funny.
why Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky basically ended the Chucky franchise, and now they're rebooting it.
Yes, the modern Chucky seem to recognize the first two, maybe three, but they have certainly decanonized Bride and Seed.
And now,
thank God.
Now they're starting over for new Child's Play.
Oh, is there a new Child's Play?
They're rebooting it.
Because I saw Curse of Chucky, and it really wasn't that bad. But
no, they're starting over.
Why not? They're starting over with all the other ones.
Yeah.
I mean, we did just get a brand new Halloween reboot, kind of. I guess it's a direct sequel to the first one.
It
supposed to be,
It is. They're saying forget all the other Halloween movies. This is the second one.
But Halloween 3 is so good.
Oh yeah.
Halloween 3. If people just ignored the fact that they wanted a Michael Myers movie, Halloween 3 is probably the second best of the Halloween movies.
Is that the Season of the Witch?
Yes, that's Season of the Witch.
I've never seen it.
It is really good. It's just people like, oh, who cares? It's a really good movie.
It was
John
an original
Carpenter
screenplay, I know that.
John Carpenter's intention was not for the Halloween movies to be the story of Michael Myers.
He wanted it to be a bunch of different stories.
They were meant to be like an anthology series. Like the new Unfriended came out is completely unrelated to the first Unfriended. Not as good, but it's a whole different movie, a whole different story, a whole different world, basically. That was the idea of the original Halloween. I think that if you get rid of the Halloween Michael Myers baggage, Season of the Witch holds up as a really good movie, and I'd even hold it above John Carpenter's Halloween 2. And no one out there, not one of you out there can tell me that Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is worse than any of the ones that came after. Halloween Water or Halloween Resurrection or any of those garbage. Not one of you can tell me that Season of the Witch is worse. And if you do, then you need to stop smoking whatever you're smoking.
Well,
Fight me.
so we got off track again, and if you got nothing else, I'm out of discussion juice, so...
I'm almost. Now I am.
So I guess we're basically done then.
Yep, I believe our next episode / will be. Do you want to announce it?
You wanted to do the top 25, each of our choices for our top 25 favorite movies?
Yes, and I'm trying to get my wife on board for this one, so it'll be probably almost 100 movies, top 100 movies within the Chaos Infinity Circle.
Maybe 125, depending on, the 5 people, 520.
I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of crossover.
Fair enough.
True.
Princess Bride's probably going to be on most of our lists. Let's be fair.
Let's spoil my list. Anyway, and also on top of that, we will have a theme song.
Yes, for the next episode. We will have a theme song. Yes. One of my favorite musicians, actually, I contacted her and she contacted me back and said it was okay. So
Surprised the heck out of you.
I just did. I'm like, there's no way she's going to acknowledge me, but
She did and gave you permission as long as we credit her.
Yep.
And we will.
And we will.
And you'll see that next time.